24 hours after I buried my husband, his father stood in my doorway and said the house reverts to blood family now. He changed the locks while I was at the cemetery, but when I pulled out the documents they never knew existed, his face went white as a sheet. You won't believe what happened next. Before we continue, please subscribe and hit that notification bell. If you've ever had to fight for what's rightfully yours against people who underestimated you, this story is for you. My name is Naomi Barrett, and I'm 32 years old. Yesterday, I buried my husband, Daniel Barrett. He was a soldier, a logistics expert, and my entire world. Today, his family tried to steal everything we built together. They thought I was just a grieving widow. They forgot who Daniel married. Let me take you back to the moment everything changed. The moment I realized my battle wasn't over. The moment I became a widow and a warrior on the same day. The rain was relentless on the day of Daniel's funeral. It felt like the sky itself was weeping, washing away the last fragments of the life I knew. I stood at the graveside in my black dress, watching them lower my husband into the ground. 28 years old when we met. 34 when he deployed for the last time. 36 when the officers came to my door. Gone. The funeral was a blur of uniforms, folded flags, and hollow condolences. The military honors were precise and cold. 21 guns. A folded flag presented to me with mechanical sympathy. Thank you for his service. As if that made it better. As if that filled the hole in my chest. His family stood across from me at the cemetery, separated by the open grave. The symbolism wasn't lost on me. My father-in-law, Lawrence Blackwood, was a towering man in his early 60s with silver hair and eyes like cold steel. He'd built Blackwood Industries from nothing 30 years ago. Started with a single truck and a military contract. Now the company was worth hundreds of millions, or so everyone thought. Lawrence ruled his empire like a tyrant, his family like subjects. He'd never approved of me. Not from the moment Daniel brought me home 7 years ago. I remember that first dinner at their estate in Buckhead. The chandelier probably cost more than my college tuition. Patricia served filet mignon on china that was older than I was. So, Naomi, Lawrence had said, cutting his steak with surgical precision. Daniel tells me you're studying supply chain management. Yes, sir, I'd answered. I was 25, terrified, trying not to spill anything. An interesting choice for a woman, he'd said. Most girls your age are studying, what, art history, communications? I found my voice. Actually, I said, women make up 43% of supply chain professionals now. And logistics is projected to be one of the fastest growing fields in the next decade. Daniel had squeezed my hand under the table. Lawrence had looked at me for a long moment. Then he'd smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. Well, he'd said. At least you're not stupid. That was the nicest thing he ever said to me. My mother-in-law, Patricia Blackwood, stood beside him now at the funeral, clutching her pearls. Always the pearls. They were Mikimoto, worth about $30,000. She told me the price the second time we met, as if I'd asked. Patricia was a woman who'd perfected the art of looking sympathetic while feeling nothing. She'd grown up in old Atlanta money, married Lawrence when he was still building his empire. She'd never worked a day in her life. She didn't understand me, didn't want to understand me. I'd tried with her. God, I'd tried. I'd invited her to lunch when Daniel and I got engaged. Just us girls, I'd said. We can get to know each other. She'd shown up 20 minutes late to the restaurant I'd chosen. This is, she'd said, looking around with barely concealed distaste, quaint. It was a cafe I loved. Good food, reasonable prices, friendly staff. We'd ordered. She'd picked at her salad. You know, Naomi, she'd said. Daniel could have married anyone. The Prescott girl was very interested. Her father owns half of Savannah. But he chose me, I'd said quietly. Yes, she'd said. He did. The subject was closed. I was acceptable, barely. But I would never be what she wanted for her son. Daniel's sister, Victoria Chen, stood there with her husband Kyle. Victoria was 34, 2 years older than Daniel had been. She'd married Kyle right out of college. He was a financial advisor, good-looking in that bland corporate way. Designer suite, perfect teeth, dead eyes. Kyle had always looked at our house like it was an investment property waiting to be flipped. I'd caught him measuring rooms once when he thought I wasn't looking. Great bones, he'd muttered to Victoria. Could easily get $800K if you updated the kitchen and bathrooms. This was at a family dinner. In our home. Victoria had never liked me from the moment Daniel brought me home. At that first dinner, she'd looked me up and down like I was a stain on the tablecloth. So you're the one, she'd said. The one? I'd asked. The one my brother's been hiding. She'd said. We were starting to think you didn't exist. We'd only been dating 2 months. Victoria worked at Blackwood Industries nominally. She had an office, a title, Vice President of Client Relations. But she came in 3 days a week and spent most of that time shopping online. Daniel had told me once, late at night after too much wine, "She's mad," he'd said, "because Dad built the company for me. For his son. Not for her." Now, they all stood together across Daniel's grave. A united front of designer black and expensive jewelry, dabbing at dry eyes with silk handkerchiefs. Patricia in Chanel. Victoria in Prada. Kyle in a Tom Ford suit. Lawrence stood like a general at a military funeral. Straight-backed. Stoic. In command. And I stood alone. Alone on my side of the grave. Alone in my off-the-rack black dress from Macy's. Alone with my grief, my rage, and my secrets. After the ceremony, they came to me one by one with their practiced sympathy. It was like watching actors in a play, performing grief they didn't feel. Patricia hugged me first. Her Chanel No. 5 was overwhelming, choking. "We're here for you, dear," she whispered into my ear. Her voice was perfect. Soft, caring, maternal. But her hands barely touched me. She pulled away quickly, as if prolonging contact might contaminate her. The words were right, but her eyes were already calculating. I could see it. The wheels turning. The assets being counted. The property being assessed. Lawrence gripped my shoulder next. His hand was heavy. Too heavy. "My son chose well," he said. He was looking at me, but not seeing me. He was seeing Daniel's 12% stake in the company. He was seeing the house Daniel and I bought. He was seeing problems to be solved, assets to be reclaimed. His hand squeezed harder, almost painful. A reminder. A warning. A claim of ownership. Victoria kissed my cheek. The kind of air kiss that doesn't actually make contact. "If there's anything you need," she said. "Anything at all." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Those eyes were hard, calculating. The same eyes that had looked at me 7 years ago and found me wanting. Kyle hung back, hands in his pockets. He didn't even pretend to offer condolences. He just looked at me with that bland professional assessment. I could practically see the spreadsheet running in his head. Assets. Liabilities. Exit strategies. I thanked them all. I played my part perfectly. The devastated widow. Barely holding it together. The woman too broken to think straight. The woman who would need their help, their guidance, their control. That's what they expected. That's what they wanted. That's what they needed me to be. But as I stood there, accepting their hollow sympathies, I thought about Daniel. Real Daniel. Not the son they'd created in their memories. Not the heir they'd groomed. Not the soldier they could claim. I thought about the man who'd proposed to me on a Tuesday. No fanfare, no expensive restaurant. Just us, in our apartment, eating takeout Chinese. He'd looked at me across the coffee table and said, "I want to marry you." Just like that. No getting down on one knee. No ring yet. Just truth. I'd said yes with my mouth full of lo mein. I thought about the man who'd told me, 2 weeks before his last deployment, about his family's secrets. We were in bed, 3 in the morning. He couldn't sleep. "There's something you need to know," he'd said. "About my father. About the company." I'd turned to face him in the darkness. "What is it?" He'd taken a deep breath. Then he'd told me everything. The fraud. The embezzlement. The falsified contracts. The offshore accounts. Years of financial crimes hidden under layers of legitimate business. "Why are you telling me this?" I'd asked. "Because," he'd said, "if something happens to me, they'll come for you. They'll try to take everything. And I need you to be ready." "Nothing's going to happen," I'd said. "Naomi," he'd said quietly, "I've been deployed 4 times. I've been lucky. But luck runs out. Don't say that." He'd pulled me close. "Just promise me," he'd said. "If something happens, you'll fight them. You won't let them win." "I promise," I'd said. He'd kissed my forehead. Then he'd gotten up and brought me a fireproof safe. Inside were copies of everything. Documents, USB drives, photographs. "Keep this," he'd said. "Don't tell anyone about it. Not my family. Not your friends. No one." I'd taken the safe. I'd hidden it. And 2 months later, the officers had come to my door. "We regret to inform you, Daniel Barrett. Killed in action. Afghanistan. Roadside explosive device. He didn't suffer. He died a hero." Empty words. He was still dead. I thought about all of this as his family surrounded me at the funeral. As they patted my shoulder and kissed my cheek and promised support they had no intention of providing. I thought about Daniel's last words to me. Not the ones on our last video call, though those hurt too. "I love you," he'd said. "I'll see you soon." Lies we tell ourselves. No. I thought about the last real thing he'd said. That night he'd given me the safe. "They'll think you're weak," he'd said. "They'll think you're just some girl I married. They don't know you like I know you." "What do you know about me?" I'd asked, trying to lighten the mood. He'd smiled. "I know you graduated top of your class. I know you turned down 3 six-figure job offers because you wanted to build something yourself. I know you negotiated our mortgage down by $40,000. I know you're the smartest person I've ever met. And they have no idea. He'd taken my hand. When they come for you, he'd said, and they will come, let them think you're weak. Let them underestimate you. Then hit them so hard they never see it coming. I'd laughed. You make it sound like war. It is war, he'd said. You just don't know it yet. Now, standing at his grave, I understood. He'd been preparing me. He'd seen this coming. He'd known exactly what his family would do. And he'd armed me. I drove home alone through the rain. My little house on Maple Street. The one Daniel and I had bought together 5 years ago. I remembered the day we'd first seen it. The realtor had been apologetic. It needs work, she'd said. A lot of work. The house was a disaster. Peeling paint. Overgrown yard. Kitchen from 1985. Bathroom with pink tile. But Daniel had walked through every room with this smile on his face. This is perfect, he'd said. The realtor had looked confused. Perfect? He'd pulled me close. It's ours, he'd said. Nobody else's. We can make it whatever we want. We'd spent 3 years renovating. Nights and weekends. YouTube tutorials and trial and error. We'd ripped out the pink tile ourselves, laughing as we sledgehammered decades of bad decisions. We'd painted the front door together just last summer. High-gloss black. I'd gotten more paint on me than the door. Daniel had painted a heart on my cheek with the brush. There, he'd said. Perfect. The memory made my chest ache so badly I could barely breathe. My car engine clicked off as I pulled into the driveway. The rain pounded on the roof like fists. Our black door looked lonely in the porch light. I sat there for a long moment, trying to gather the strength to walk into that empty house. To face the silence. To face the absence. Then I heard it. A metallic grinding sound cutting through the rain. Sharp. Mechanical. Wrong. I looked up. Under the small porch light, a man I didn't recognize was drilling into my front door. My black door. The one that still had Daniel's fingerprints on it if you looked close enough. He was wearing a work uniform. Some kind of locksmith company logo on his back. His drill was biting into the wood around the deadbolt. Standing over him, holding a large black umbrella like a parasol, was Kyle Chen. My brother-in-law. He was completely dry under that umbrella, not a drop of rain on his expensive suit. His hair perfectly styled, his face calm. Like this was normal. Like this was fine. He saw me pull up. He saw me sitting there in my car, staring in disbelief. And he didn't even flinch. He just smiled. That thin reptilian smile I'd seen so many times when he talked about portfolios and market corrections and liquidity events. Naomi, he called out, his voice casual, friendly even. Like we'd just bumped into each other at the grocery store. You're back. Good timing. I couldn't move. My brain was trying to process what I was seeing. My funeral dress was still damp from standing in the rain at the cemetery. I'd buried my husband 3 hours ago. And someone was drilling into my door. I stepped out of the car slowly. The rain hit me immediately. Cold. Angry. Soaking through my dress in seconds. Kyle, I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears. Surprisingly steady. What are you doing? He tilted his head, like I'd asked a silly question. Just taking care of some business, he said. Estate matters. Nothing for you to worry about. Who is this man? I asked, pointing at the locksmith. Why is he drilling into my door? The drilling stopped. The locksmith looked uncomfortable now. He was a young guy, maybe 25. He glanced between me and Kyle, clearly sensing the tension. Ma'am, he started to say. Then my front door opened from the inside. I felt something cold wash over me. Because it wasn't the locksmith who opened that door. He was still standing outside with his drill. Someone else had opened my door. From inside my house. Lawrence Blackwood stepped out onto the porch. My father-in-law stood in my doorway, framed by the warm light from my living room, wearing his Sunday suit like he owned the place. Like he had every right to be there. Like this was his home. Behind him, I could see Patricia in the hallway. And was that Victoria in my kitchen? He's here on our authority, Lawrence said. His voice was deep, commanding. The voice of a man who'd spent 30 years giving orders and having them obeyed without question. Your authority? I repeated. The words felt absurd in my mouth. I was standing in my own driveway, soaked to the bone, watching strangers change my locks. Lawrence stepped off the porch. Kyle moved aside to give him space, like a courtier making way for a king. The rain didn't seem to touch Lawrence. He moved through it like it didn't exist. Naomi, he said, and his tone shifted. I thought about Daniel's last words to me. Not the ones on our last video call, though those hurt too. I love you, he'd said. I'll see you soon. Lies we tell ourselves. No. I thought about the last real thing he'd said. That night he'd given me the safe. "They'll think you're weak," he'd said. "They'll think you're just some girl I married. They don't know you like I know you." "What do you know about me?" I'd asked, trying to lighten the mood. He'd smiled. Became softer. Almost gentle. The concerned father-in-law. "I know this is difficult. I know you've just lost Daniel." His name in Lawrence's mouth felt wrong. Profane. "You're emotional," Lawrence continued. "You're vulnerable. You're not thinking clearly. That's understandable. That's natural." He took another step closer. "But there are matters that need to be addressed immediately," he said. "Decisions that can't wait. Daniel would want his family to handle these things. These things need to be handled properly, by people who understand complex financial and legal matters." "I understand these matters perfectly," I said. Lawrence actually smiled at that. It was the kind of smile you give a child who says they want to be an astronaut. Indulgent. Patronizing. Dismissive. "I'm sure you think you do, dear," he said. "But these are very complex issues. Corporate structures, tax implications, trust distributions. Daniel would want his family to handle them. His blood family." There it was. Blood family. The words he'd been building toward. I felt something cold and hard settle in my chest. Not fear. Not panics. Rage. Pure, crystalline rage. "Are you changing my locks?" I asked quietly. Lawrence sighed. Like I was being difficult. Like I was the problem here. "We're securing the property," he said. "Daniel's property. This house was purchased with Blackwood money. Daniel's income came from his position at Blackwood Industries. His salary, his bonus, his stock options. All from the family business. Now that he's gone, God rest his soul, the property reverts to the family." "No, it doesn't," I said. Patricia appeared in the doorway behind Lawrence. Perfect timing. Like they'd rehearsed this. "Sweetheart," she said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "We know you're grieving. We know this is so hard for you. Losing Daniel must be just devastating." She dabbed at her dry eyes with a handkerchief. "But you need to understand," she continued. "You're not a Blackwood by blood. You were Daniel's wife, and we loved that about you, truly we did. But now that he's gone, the family assets must be protected. It's just the way these things work." "Protected from what?" I asked. "From me?" Victoria appeared next to her mother. The three of them, lined up on my porch like a firing squad. "Nobody's saying you're a threat, Naomi," Victoria said. Her voice was sharp, impatient. She'd never been good at pretending. "We're just saying this is family business. Blood family business. You're not equipped to handle these things. You don't understand how our world works." I stood there, water streaming down my face. Rain or tears, I couldn't tell anymore. I looked at each of them. Lawrence, standing tall and certain, like a general who'd already won the war. Patricia, with her pearl-clutching performance, practiced to perfection. Victoria, with her smug superiority, barely concealed. Kyle, still holding that umbrella, watching me like I was a problem with a solution. And behind them, through my open door, I could see my living room. The couch Daniel and I had picked out together. The photos on the mantel. Our life. Our home. They were stealing it. Right in front of me. And they expected me to just let them. "Get out of my house," I said quietly. Lawrence's expression hardened. "This is not your house," he said. "Not anymore. The lawyers will explain everything tomorrow. Tonight, we're simply taking possession of what belongs to the Blackwood family." He pulled a document from his jacket pocket. "I had my attorneys draw this up," he said, holding it out to me. "It's a waiver. Sign it, and we'll provide you with a generous settlement. $50,000. Enough to get you started somewhere else." I looked at the paper getting wet in the rain. I didn't take it. "You're evicting me," I said. "The day I buried your son." Lawrence's face remained impassive. "We're doing what's necessary to protect the family's interests. Daniel would understand." "Would he?" I asked. Lawrence stepped closer, towering over me. "You have two choices, Naomi," he said, his voice low and threatening. "You can sign this document, take the money, and leave quietly. Or you can refuse, and we'll have you removed by law enforcement for trespassing. Your belongings will be placed on the curb. You'll have nothing." I looked up at him, this man who'd never liked me, who'd barely tolerated me at family dinners, who'd made it clear I wasn't good enough for his son. "I have a third choice," I said quietly. Lawrence raised an eyebrow. "Oh?" I looked him dead in the eye. "I can fight you," I said. "And I can win." He actually laughed. It was a cruel, dismissive sound. "With what exactly?" he asked. "You have no money. You have no family. You have no legal standing. Daniel's assets are tied up in the family business. You have nothing." I smiled. It was a small, cold smile. "You forgot one thing," I said. "What's that?" he asked, amused. "You forgot who Daniel married," I said. He didn't marry some helpless girl who would roll over when you came to steal everything. He married a logistics coordinator with a master's degree in supply chain management. He married someone who understands contracts, assets, and legal documentation better than your expensive lawyers. Lawrence's smile faltered. And most importantly, I continued, he married someone he trusted enough to show how your family really operates. The air changed. Patricia's hand flew to her throat. Kyle's smug expression cracked. Victoria took a step back. What are you talking about? Lawrence asked, his voice dangerous. I'm talking about the second set of books, I said. The ones Daniel kept. The ones that show every fraudulent transaction Blackwood Industries has made over the past 10 years. Lawrence's face went white. I'm talking about the offshore accounts, I continued. The tax evasion schemes. The falsified government contracts. The embezzlement. You're lying, Victoria hissed. Am I? I asked. Daniel was head of logistics for your company. He saw everything. He documented everything. And before his last deployment, he gave it all to me. Kyle stepped forward. You're bluffing, he said. You have nothing. I pulled my phone from my purse. I held it up, showing them the screen. On it was a photo of a safe deposit box key. Box 473, at First National Bank, I said. In my name. Containing copies of every document Daniel ever collected. Bank statements, emails, contracts, ledger. All of it. Patricia made a strangled sound. If you force me out of this house, I continued, those documents go to the IRS, the FBI, and the Department of Defense. Your government contracts will be canceled. Your business will be audited. And Lawrence, you'll spend the rest of your life in federal prison. The silence was deafening. Lawrence stared at me, his jaw working. You wouldn't dare, he finally said. Try me, I said. I have nothing left to lose. You took my husband. You're trying to take my home. What exactly do you think I'm afraid of? He took a step toward me, his fists clenched. The locksmith cleared his throat. Mr. Blackwood, he said nervously. I don't think I should be here for this. Get out, Lawrence snarled at him. The man practically ran to his van and drove away. We stood there in the rain, facing each other. Here's what's going to happen, I said, my voice calm and cold. You're going to leave my property. You're going to replace my lock with the original. And you're going to pretend this never happened. And if we don't? Kyle asked. Then tomorrow morning, federal agents will be raiding Blackwood Industries, I said. I've already prepared the packages. They're sitting in a secure location. If I don't check in every 24 hours, they get mailed automatically. Victoria looked at her father. Daddy, she whispered. Is she telling the truth? About the documents? Lawrence didn't answer. His silence was answer enough. Patricia started crying. Real tears this time. How could you do this to us? She sobbed. We're family. You tried to throw me out of my house the day I buried your son, I said. You're not my family. I turned to Lawrence. You have 10 minutes to get off my property, I said. Or I make the call. I walked past them, up my porch steps, and into my house. I stood in the doorway, looking back at them. Rain poured down. They stood there, frozen. 9 minutes, I said. Then I closed the door. I leaned against it, my heart pounding. My hands were shaking. I'd just declared war on one of the most powerful families in Atlanta. But I wasn't bluffing. Daniel had told me everything before his last deployment. He'd known his family was corrupt. He'd been collecting evidence for years, trying to figure out how to expose them without destroying himself. And when he knew he might not come back, he'd given it all to me. Just in case, he'd said. Just in case they try something. He'd known. He'd known exactly what they were. I walked through the house, changing out of my wet funeral dress. I put on jeans and a sweatshirt. I made coffee. And I waited. 30 minutes later, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find a new locksmith. Ma'am, he said nervously. I was told to install your original lock back free of charge. I watched him work. When he finished, he handed me the key and practically sprinted to his truck. I locked the door behind him. Then I sat down at my kitchen table with my laptop and got to work. Because the truth was, I hadn't been bluffing about the documents. But I'd been strategic about what I'd revealed. Daniel's evidence wasn't just about financial crimes. It was about the company itself. Blackwood Industries was failing. Lawrence had been cooking the books for years, hiding massive losses. They were months away from bankruptcy. And that's why they wanted my house. They needed liquid assets. They needed to sell properties, consolidate, and hide their collapse. I spent the next 3 days going through every document Daniel had left me. Every single page. Every email. Every photograph. Every spreadsheet. The safe Daniel had given me was fireproof and waterproof. Inside were 3 USB drives, 2 external hard drives, and a thick manila envelope containing printed documents. The first USB drive was labeled Financial Records, 2015 to 2020. It contained scanned copies of Blackwood Industries' internal accounting documents. 2 sets of books. The official ones they showed the IRS and their investors, and the real ones that showed what was actually happening. The discrepancies were staggering. The official books showed steady growth, modest profits, conservative spending. The real books showed a company hemorrhaging money, failed investments hidden in shell companies, massive loans disguised as operating expenses, revenue inflated by counting the same contracts multiple times. The second USB drive was correspondence. Thousands of emails. Lawrence negotiating kickbacks with government contractors. Victoria approving fraudulent expense reports. Kyle advising them on how to hide money offshore. The third drive was the nuclear option. Video files. Daniel had secretly recorded meetings. Board meetings where they discussed falsifying safety reports. And tell him my husband died serving this country 2 weeks ago. There was a pause. Hold please. 60 seconds later, a deep voice came on the line. This is Robert Chen, he said. You have 2 minutes. Make them count. My name is Naomi Barrett, I said. My husband was Daniel Barrett. Army captain. Logistics officer. Killed in action 3 weeks ago. I'm sorry for your loss, Chen said. His voice was gentler now. Everything he'd witnessed. Everything he'd documented. Signed and witnessed. Legal. Admissible. Devastating. I worked through the nights. Coffee and adrenaline keeping me going. I created spreadsheets cross-referencing the evidence. I built timelines showing when each crime occurred. I organized everything by type of fraud. Wire fraud. Tax evasion. Contract fraud. Money laundering. Bribery. By day 3, I had a case that could send Lawrence to prison for 20 years. Victoria for 10. Kyle for 15. On day 4, I made my first call. Robert Chen, no relation to Kyle, was known as the best corporate attorney in Atlanta. He didn't take walk-in clients. He didn't return cold calls. His retainer alone was $50,000. But I'd done my research. I knew he'd represented whistleblowers in 3 major corporate fraud cases. I knew he'd won all 3. And I knew he hated corrupt executives with a passion. His secretary answered on the 3rd ring. Chen and Associates, she said professionally. I need to speak with Mr. Chen, I said. It's regarding a corporate fraud case. Mr. Chen is extremely busy, she began. If you'd like to schedule a consultation, the earliest. Tell him I have evidence of $100 million fraud involving government contracts and offshore accounts, I interrupted. Tell him the perpetrators are currently trying to evict me from my home. I locked the door behind him. Then I sat down at my kitchen table with my laptop and got to work. Because the truth was, I hadn't been bluffing about the documents. But I'd been strategic about what I'd revealed. Daniel's evidence wasn't just about financial crimes. It was about the company itself. Blackwood Industries was failing. Lawrence had been cooking the books for years, hiding massive losses. They were months away from bankruptcy. And that's why they wanted my house. Everything he'd witnessed. Everything he'd documented. Signed and witnessed. Legal. Admissible. Devastating. I worked through the nights. Coffee and adrenaline keeping me going. I created spreadsheets cross-referencing the evidence. I built timelines showing when each crime occurred. I organized everything by type of fraud. Wire fraud. Tax evasion. Contract fraud. Money laundering. Bribery. By day 3, I had a case that could send Lawrence to prison for 20 years. Audio of bribery negotiations. Offshore bank statements. 2 sets of books. An signed affidavit from Daniel detailing everything he witnessed. Chen was quiet for a moment. Can you be at my office in 1 hour? He asked. Yes. Bring everything, he said. All of it. I can't carry it all, I said. It's terabytes of data. Then bring samples, he said. Enough for me to verify this is real. 1 hour later, I walked into the most expensive law office I'd ever seen. Chen and Associates occupied the entire 30th floor of a downtown tower. Glass walls. Modern art. Furniture that cost more than my car. Robert Chen himself met me in the lobby. He was in his mid-50s, Chinese-American, with salt and pepper hair and sharp, intelligent eyes. He wore a suit that probably cost $5,000. Mrs. Barrett, he said, shaking my hand. Conference room 3. He led me to a private room with a view of the city. A junior associate was already waiting with a laptop and a legal pad. This is Maya Patel, Chen said. She'll be assisting on this case if we take it. I set my bag on the table. Inside were 3 USB drives, a laptop, and printed copies of the most damaging evidence. Show me, Chen said. I spent the next 4 hours walking them through Daniel's evidence. Chen's expression didn't change as I showed him the fraudulent contracts. He didn't react when I played the video of Lawrence bribing a federal inspector. He remained impassive through the offshore account statements. But Maya gasped several times. Her pen flew across her legal pad, taking notes so fast her hand was a blur. When I finished, Chen leaned back in his chair. He was quiet for a long moment. Finally, he spoke. "This is," he said slowly, "the most comprehensive evidence of corporate fraud I have ever seen in 30 years of practice." "Is it enough?" I asked. "Enough?" he repeated. "Mrs. Barrett, this is enough to destroy Blackwood Industries completely. This is enough to put Lawrence Blackwood in federal prison for the rest of his natural life. This is enough to disbar every attorney who ever worked for him. This is enough to trigger criminal investigations in 4 states and 2 foreign countries." He leaned forward. "The question is," he said, "is that what you want?" I thought about it. Really thought about it. I could destroy them. Send them all to prison. Watch their empire crumble. But that would destroy Daniel's legacy too. His name was on that company. Barrett. The company his grandfather had helped build. And Daniel had wanted me to protect that legacy, not destroy it. "I want the company," I said. Chen raised an eyebrow. "You want to run Blackwood Industries?" "I want to transform it," I said. "Clean it up. Run it legitimately. Honor what it was supposed to be." He studied me for a moment. "That's ambitious," he said. "Do you have any experience running a company?" "No," I said. "But I have a master's degree in logistics. I understand supply chains, contracts, and operations. And I'm a very fast learner." "And you think Lawrence Blackwood will just hand over his company?" "He will, if the alternative is federal prison," I said. Chen smiled. It was not a nice smile. It was the smile of a lawyer who just found a case he wanted to destroy someone with. Chen and associates occupied the entire 30th floor of a downtown tower. Glass walls. Modern art. Furniture that cost more than my car. Robert Chen himself met me in the lobby. He was in his mid-50s, Chinese-American, with salt and pepper hair and sharp, intelligent eyes. He wore a suit that probably cost $5,000. "Mrs. Barrett," he said, shaking my hand. "Conference room 3. He led me to a private room with a view of the city. I was a shareholder now, having inherited Daniel's 12%. That gave me standing to sue the board for mismanagement. He also prepared criminal referral packages, ready to send to the FBI, IRS, and Department of Defense Inspector General. All documented, all sourced, all ready to go. But he didn't file them. Not yet. Instead, he called Lawrence Blackwood's attorney. Arranged a meeting. Just to discuss certain irregularities that had come to light. Lawrence's lawyer showed up alone. Martin Westbrook. A partner at one of Atlanta's biggest corporate firms. Chen handed him a folder. Inside were copies of 10 of the most damaging documents. Just 10. A preview. Westbrook read through them. His face went from professional curiosity to shocked disbelief to barely concealed horror. "Where did you get these?" he asked quietly. "From my client," Chen said. "The widow of Daniel Barrett. Lawrence Blackwood's son." Westbrook closed the folder. "What does she want?" "To discuss a settlement," Chen said. "How much?" "It's not about money," Chen said. "Then what?" "Control," Chen said simply. 2 days later, I got the call from Lawrence. His voice was tight, controlled. "We need to talk," he said. "About what?" I asked pleasantly. "About an arrangement," he said. "A compromise." "I'm listening." "Meet me at my office tomorrow," he said. 10 a.m. "I'll be there," I said. The next morning, I dressed carefully. Not just carefully. Strategically. I chose a black suit. Not designer. Not expensiva. But well-tailored and severe. The kind of suit that says business, not grieving. I pulled my hair back into a tight bun. Minimal makeup. No jewelry except my wedding ring. I looked in the mirror. The woman looking back at me was not the woman who'd stood in the rain a week ago. That woman had been broken. Desperate. Afraid. This woman was armored. Ready. Dangerous. Robert Chen had offered to come with me. "You shouldn't face them alone," he'd said. I'd declined. This was personal. This needed to be just me and them. But I carried his business card in my pocket. And I knew he was one phone call away. Blackwood Industries was in a downtown high-rise on Peachtree Street. 30 stories of glass and steel. The Blackwood name in massive gold letters visible from 3 blocks away. I'd been here before, of course. Company Christmas parties. Quarterly meetings Daniel had to attend. Family dinners in the executive dining room. But I'd always been here as Daniel's wife. The plus one. The accessory. Today, I was here as a shareholder. As an adversary. As the person who could destroy everything they'd built. The lobby was all marble and glass. Expensive. Intimidating. Designed to make visitors feel small. The receptionist looked up as I approached. She was young, blonde, perfectly made up. "Can I help you?" she asked with practiced friendliness. Naomi Barrett to see. Lawrence Blackwood, I said. I have a 10 a.m. appointment. Her smile faltered slightly. She'd been at the funeral. She knew who I was. She'd probably heard the office gossip about the Blackwood son's wife. One moment please, she said, picking up the phone. She spoke quietly, then looked up at me. Take the elevator to the top floor, she said. Mr. Blackwood's office is straight ahead when you exit. I rode the elevator alone. 30 floors. Plenty of time to second-guess myself. Plenty of time to remember I was about to walk into a room full of people who hated me. Plenty of time to chicken out. I didn't. The doors opened. Lawrence's secretary was waiting. She was older, in her 50s, with perfectly coiffed hair and an expression that managed to be both professional and contemptuous. Mrs. Barrett, she said, her voice icy. He's expecting you. Quarterly meetings Daniel had to attend. Family dinners in the executive dining room. But I'd always been here as Daniel's wife. The plus one. The accessory. Today, I was here as a shareholder. As an adversary. As the person who could destroy everything they'd built. The lobby was all marble and glass. Expensive. Intimidating. Designed to make visitors feel small. The receptionist looked up as I approached. She was young, blonde, perfectly made up. The patriotic CEO who lost his son serving his country. I wanted to rip it off the wall. Lawrence's office was at the end of the hall. The door was open. I stopped in the doorway. The office was massive. It had to be 2,000 square feet. Floor-to-ceiling windows on 2 walls overlooking downtown Atlanta. A desk the size of a dining table. Leather furniture that probably cost more than my car. Awards and plaques covering an entire wall. Lawrence sat behind his desk like a king on a throne. Patricia was there, sitting in one of the leather chairs, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. Even now, she was performing. Victoria and Kyle sat together on a sofa. Kyle had his financial advisor smile on. Professional. Calculated. Already planning how to minimize the damage. Victoria just glared at me with naked hatred. They all looked at me as I entered. Their expressions a mixture of contempt, fury, and barely concealed fear. Naomi, Lawrence said, gesturing to an empty chair facing his desk. Please. Sit. The chair was lower than the others. Deliberately. An old power play. Make the person you're negotiating with sit lower than you. Make them feel small. I remained standing. Let's make this quick, I said. What do you want? Lawrence steepled his fingers. He was trying to look calm, in control, but I could see the tension in his jaw, the slight tremor in his hands. I've thought about our little situation, he said. The unfortunate misunderstanding from last week. Misunderstanding? I repeated. You tried to evict me from my home. You were emotional, he said. We were all emotional. Daniel's death affected everyone. Perhaps we all said things we didn't mean. I didn't say anything I didn't mean, I said. Lawrence's smile was tight. Be that as it may, he continued, I believe we can reach a mutually beneficial agreement. One that allows us all to move forward without any unpleasantness. I'm listening. He opened a folder on his desk. You claim to have certain documents, he said. Copies of company files that you say show irregularities. I didn't say irregularities. I corrected. I said fraud. Wire fraud, tax evasion, contract fraud, and bribery. Patricia let out a small sob. It was fake. I could tell. Lawrence's jaw tightened. That's a very serious accusation, he said. It's not an accusation, I said. It's a fact. Documented fact. Kyle leaned forward. Even if such documents existed, he said in his smooth financial advisor voice, which I'm not conceding, you have to understand the legal complexity here. Corporate accounting is nuanced. What might look irregular to a layperson could be perfectly legitimate business practices. I looked at him. I'm not a layperson, I said. What do you want? He asked. His voice was tight. Controlled. Barely. Money? He continued. How much? Name your price. 1 million? 2 million? I shook my head. 5 million, Victoria said desperately. We can pay you 5 million to walk away. I don't want your money, I said. Then what? Patricia cried. What could you possibly want? I looked at Lawrence. His empire. His legacy. His seat of power. I want the company, I said clearly. The room exploded. You're insane. Lawrence Blackwood and his associates have been defrauding investors, evading taxes, and violating federal contracting law for over 8 years. The room was very quiet. So let's skip the part where you pretend this is a misunderstanding, I said. Let's skip the part where you try to intimidate me with lawyers and legal complexity. I have better lawyers than you. I have better evidence than you can imagine. And I'm not afraid of you anymore. Lawrence's face was turning red. Be that as it may, he continued, I believe we can reach a mutually beneficial agreement. One that allows us all to move forward without any unpleasantness. I'm listening. He opened a folder on his desk. You claim to have certain documents, he said. Copies of company files that you say show irregularities. I didn't say irregularities. I corrected. I said fraud. Wire fraud, tax evasion, contract fraud, and bribery. Patricia let out a small sob. It was fake. I could tell. Victoria shrieked. That's not even legal. Kyle shouted. Lawrence, Patricia sobbed. Tell her no. Tell her this is insane. But Lawrence just sat there, staring at me. He knew. He knew I had the evidence to destroy him. He knew I had the leverage. He knew he'd already lost. Explain, he said quietly. Blackwood Industries is worth approximately $200 million on paper, I said. I have a master's degree in supply chain management. I understand corporate accounting. I understand the difference between aggressive tax strategy and tax fraud. And I know the difference between creative bookkeeping and embezzlement. Kyle's smile faded. I also have, I continued, 3 forensic accountants who've reviewed the evidence. All 3 reached the same conclusion. But in reality, after accounting for your hidden debts, fraudulent assets, and pending lawsuits, it's worth about $80 million. Maybe. I pulled the folder Robert Chen had prepared from my bag. I dropped it on Lawrence's desk. Here's a full financial audit, I said, conducted by Chen and Associates. Your company is 3 months from insolvency. Your largest contracts are built on fraud and will be canceled once the government finds out. Your credit lines will be frozen. Stock he inherited from his grandfather, Thomas Blackwood. Stock that, upon his death, transferred to his spouse. To me. Victoria stood up. No, she said. That can't be right. Grandfather left that stock to the family. I laid the document on the desk. Thomas Blackwood's will, I said. Filed in 1998. Leaving 12% of the company to his grandson, Daniel Barrett, to pass to Daniel's heirs upon his death. Kyle grabbed the paper. His hands were shaking as he scanned it. And here is Daniel's will, I said, laying down another document. Filed 3 weeks before his final deployment. Naming me as his sole beneficiary. Witnessed. Notarized. Filed with the county clerk. Completely legal. Kyle's face went white. So I already own 12% of Blackwood Industries, I said, which means I'm a shareholder, which means I have standing to sue for mismanagement. I have standing to demand a full audit. I have standing to call a vote of no confidence. I have standing to force this company into receivership. Lawrence stood up. His chair scraped loudly against the floor. You will do no such thing, he said. His voice was shaking with rage. Won't I? I asked. I pulled out my phone. I pulled up Robert Chen's number. 1 call, I said. 1 call and criminal referrals go to the FBI, the IRS, the Department of Defense, and the SEC. By end of business today, federal agents will be raiding this building. Patricia was openly crying now. Real tears. Please, she whispered. Please don't destroy us. I looked at her. This woman who'd looked down on me for 7 years. Who'd made it clear I wasn't good enough for her son. Who'd tried to throw me out of my house the day after his funeral. I'm not trying to destroy you, I said. I'm trying to save Daniel's legacy. I turned back to Lawrence. Here's my final offer, I said. You transfer 39% of your personal shares to me. Added to Daniel's 12%, that gives me 51%. Controlling interest. Lawrence was shaking his head. Never, he said. I will never. The alternative, I interrupted, is federal prison. For you, for Victoria, and probably for Kyle. I looked at each of them. 20 years minimum, I said. For Lawrence. The government doesn't like it when you defraud them. They really don't like it when you fake safety reports on military equipment. His face went even whiter. 10 years for Victoria, I continued. As a knowing participant and beneficiary of the fraud, and 15 for Kyle, I finished. For money laundering and wire fraud. The room was silent except for Patricia's quiet sobbing. Or, I said, you can accept my offer. You transfer the shares. I become CEO. You stay on as paid consultants. 6-figure salaries. You keep your dignity. You keep your freedom. You keep your reputations. But you don't control the company anymore. Lawrence sank back into his chair. He looked old suddenly. Broken. Defeated. You're taking everything, he whispered. No, I said. I'm taking what should have been Daniel's. What he would have inherited if you hadn't been corrupt. What he would have built if you hadn't turned the family business into a criminal enterprise. I looked at the photo of Daniel on the wall. I'm protecting his legacy, I said. Something you never did. I turned back to Lawrence. You have 72 hours to decide, I said. After that, the offer expires. And the documents go to federal prosecutors. I picked up my purse. I walked toward the door. Wait, Patricia said. Her voice was small. Broken. I turned. If we agree, she asked, what happens to us? I already told you, I said. Consulting positions, salaries, benefits. But no power, no control, no access to company funds. And the evidence? Kyle asked. The documents? Stay sealed, I said. As long as you never try to challenge me again. As long as you accept the new reality. As long as you stay in your lane. And if we don't? Victoria asked. Then I destroy everything, I said simply. The company. Your reputation. Your freedom. Everything. I looked at Lawrence one last time. Choose wisely, I said. Then I walked out. I made it to the elevator before my hands started shaking. Made it to the lobby before my knees went weak. Made it to my car before the adrenaline crash hit. I sat in the parking garage for 20 minutes. Breathing. Processing. Trying to believe what I'd just done. I'd walked into the lion's den. I'd faced down one of the most powerful men in Atlanta. I'd demanded his empire. And I was going to win. My phone rang. Robert Shane. How did it go? He asked. I think they'll sign, I said. He was quiet for a moment. You know this changes everything, he said. You'll be a CEO of a major company. You'll have power, responsibility, enemies. I know, I said. Are you ready for that? I thought about Daniel. About the life we'd planned. About the house we'd painted together. About the dreams we'd had. All of it was gone. But I could still protect what he'd cared about. I could still honor his memory. I could still fight. Yes, I said. I'm ready. 71 hours later, Lawrence signed the papers. Not because he wanted to. Because he had no choice. The stock transfer was executed at Robert Chen's office. Lawrence, Patricia, Victoria, and Kyle sat on one side of the conference table. I sat on the other. Between us were stacks of legal documents. Share transfer agreements. Consulting contracts. Non-compete clauses. Non-disclosure agreements. Lawrence had aged 10 years in 3 days. His hands shook as he signed each page. When it was done, Robert Chen looked at me. Congratulations, Miss Barrett, he said. You're now the majority shareholder and CEO of Blackwood Industries. Lawrence stood up. He looked at me with pure hatred. This isn't over, he said quietly. Yes, it is, I said. You're just the last to know it. They left without another word. I walked into Blackwood Industries as the majority shareholder and new CEO. The staff was in shock. The board was furious. The Blackwood family was humiliated. But they were alive. They were free. And they still had their name. It could have been so much worse. 6 months later, I stood in Lawrence's old office. My office now. I'd removed the heavy dark curtains he loved. Sunlight poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Outside, workers were installing a new sign on the building. The Blackwood name was coming down. The new sign went up in brushed steel letters. Ironclad Logistics. Named after Daniel. My ironclad soldier. I turned from the window and looked at my desk. On it sat a single silver-framed photograph. Daniel in his uniform, his arm around me, both of us smiling. They thought I was just a grieving widow, I whispered to his picture. They thought I was weak. I picked up the frame, tracing the edge with my thumb. They forgot who you married, Daniel, I said. You didn't marry a victim. You married a strategist. I set the photo back down and sat in the big leather CEO chair. Lawrence's chair. My chair now. I turned to face the window, to face the Atlanta skyline. This city hadn't beaten me. It was waiting for me. And I was ready. The lesson from this story is simple but powerful. Never underestimate someone who appears quiet or broken. The Blackwoods saw a grieving widow and failed to see the meticulous strategist Daniel had married. They relied on loud, arrogant bullying. I relied on quiet, lethal preparation. True strength isn't about the noise you make. It's about the ironclad moves you execute when no one is watching. Their fatal error was assuming my grief made me weak. It only made me focused. Have you ever had to fight back against someone who underestimated you? Have you ever had to prove yourself to people who thought you were powerless? Share your story in the comments below. And if this resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button. Because sometimes the quietest person in the room is the most dangerous. Thank you for listening.